In the last project we actually made a simple joystick and we used it to move around a simple item like sprite 2D on the screen. Remember I said I wanted all the files in a single folder, so we put it all in Virtual Joystick folder here. That's because we just want to copy this folder and carry it across to our other projects like the BlendSpace1D and the BlendSpace2D. So let's get to that. As you can see, I opened the AnimationFoundation project again, and we have the BlendSpace1D. I organize everything into folders so it's easier for me to find everything. And we had BlendSpace2D as well. I'm just going to open the folder that contains the virtual joystick and I'm just going to drag it across. Okay, so this is my folder that has my virtual joystick. This is under my Godot projects. And this is the virtual joystick tutorial that we did last time. If you notice that we have a folder that contains the image files and these files here that are related to the virtual joystick tutorial alone, and they're all encapsulated in this folder called virtual joystick. I'm just going to drag this across. Now it's easy to do this. This will not always work if you have files spread all over the place for any particular project that you have. Try to get all the files concerned with that into one folder, and then it'll be easy to transfer across. And also make sure there are no dependencies outside of this folder. For example, like input dependencies. If you have customized inputs and so on, you will have to redo the inputs, and if there are any other dependency files that are external to this folder, you will have to include those somehow. Okay, so let's just drag it across into the res folder, and as you can see at the bottom here, it came up as virtual joystick. We can close this window now. Okay, so we have the virtual joystick folder. As you can see, we have all the scenes here and the scripts and so on. Let's just open the virtual joystick scene. If we run this as is, if we don't have the project settings for the mouse pointer, it's not going to work. So let's just try to run the scene alone. As you can see, it's not working. That's because the code that we wrote is for touch screen. So don't forget to go into pointing under input devices and switch on emulate touch from mouse, and you can turn off the other one as usual. Let's play this now, and as you can see, the joystick works well. We can close off the virtual joystick scene for now. We don't need it. Remember, we had this BlendSpace1D scene. Let's add a joystick here. So let's go and click the link button. So we're going to instantiate this child scene, and we're going to add our virtual joystick here. As you can see, it shows up at the bottom of the scene tree. Let's go into script. Make sure we have BlendSpace1D open, and we don't need the move by key. Let's just minimize this. We don't need also anymore. We can just comment it out maybe. Let's comment out move by key as well. And let's just create a new function called move by joystick maybe. It doesn't matter what you want to call it. And just below that, let's actually create the function move by joystick. And here it's going to be really simple. We just want to get a direction vector, or maybe just a direction. Remember, let's go back to the 2D scene. Remember, in this 2D scene, we were just moving in one axis, the x-axis, either left or right. And if you go into AnimationTree, you'll also see that at the bottom here, we're only going on one direction on the axis. We'll have to fix something here, but I'll explain that later. We'll have to lower this to 1.0 because the vector that we get from the virtual joystick, it's normalized and we only go up to 1.0. But let's deal with this first. So we have our virtual joystick here. Let's drag it down wherever you like. And let's go back to the script and let's just say var direction x maybe. Or you can actually get a full vector if you like, but we're not going to use it. So let me get a full vector so we can see what will happen, the error that we'll get. When we get errors, we don't forget it sometimes. Is equal to vector 2. and this will be equal to our virtual joystick. Get the reference to the virtual joystick, and dot get, I believe the associated function was get joystick. There it is, get for joystick vector. And let's go to the bottom of that. If we just use the animation tree that we have here, that we did before, Control C, Control V, and try to plug in this vector, we don't need the blend value anymore. We don't need to change the blend value anymore. We are just directly using the vector now. So let's just comment this out, and we're not going to do any loop, so we don't need any current values. Over here we're going to put in the direction vector that we just created, and we're going to get an error, as you can see. Let's save this and let's run this, and when you try to move, you realize he's not moving, but we're getting a lot of errors in the debugger. Let's close this off and see what the errors are. Mismatch between initial and final value, and it expects to see a float, but it's getting a vector too, because remember, it's just one direction, just the X axis, and our animation tree expects to see values from one axis alone, not a vector. So in our script, let's just take this, we can just fix it in here and just type in .x, and that will be the simplest way out. So that takes the direction vector and extracts the x value, and that's the easiest way out. Actually, we don't need to create another variable. Let's save this and see what happens. Let's run that, and let's move him, and as you can see, if we move all the way, he's only walking. He can walk backwards. If we move up, nothing will really happen unless we move to a certain position where it's registering the x axis better. And the reason he's not running is because, as I pointed out before, in the animation tree at the bottom here, we have values all the way up to 2, but from our vector, when we made our joystick, it's a normalized vector, which means it doesn't surpass the value of 1. So what we need to do is probably just break this down. We can multiply the values by 2 here, and that will work well. But a more graceful way of dealing with this is setting the value for half around here. Let me just check the parameters. The blend position 0.5, right? We want to put half here, so let's just add the animation here, and we'll put this as our walk animation. And let's just select this other one and delete it, and let's select this, and we can pull this into 1, or we can just delete it and redo it. But let's see, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 are supposed to be here, and we're going to drop this to 1.0. So now we have a normalized vector. It only goes all the way up to 1. So if we move to 0.5, we should get walking, and somewhere in between here we're supposed to get running. Let's save this and let's try this again. And as you can see now, let's move backwards and it works well. Let's move forward. If we go halfway, that's somewhere around 0.5, a value of x. He walks, and if we move all the way, he starts to run. If we release, he stops. If we move up, it doesn't really bother him, but if we move to some position where the x value gets a little higher, like minus 0.5 or closer to 0.5, we get our movements. So this works. Okay, so let's figure out how to use this in our BlendSpace2D. So let's just open up our BlendSpace2D scene and the BlendSpace2D script. And this one will be much simpler. We didn't use any separate functions in this one, so you can if you want to, but let's just, for simplicity's sake, let's just put it directly inside the physics process. Let's create a new vector input, let's call it input underscore vector, and from this we're just going to drag the virtual joystick, which we did not add to the scene, so let's just add it here. There we go. So we have our virtual joystick on the scene, and the input vector is equal to the virtual joystick dot get joystick vector. Yep, there we go. And that's it. We're just going to set our tree to that. Tree, if you look at the bottom, you'll see the code that we need to use. Tree.set, and then we drag our blend position across. There we go. And we're going to set that blend position, don't forget the comma, to this input vector, and it's simple as that. Because remember, in this case we needed our character. When we did the animation tree for this, we had an X and Y axis because we have movement along the X or Y axis for our little character. And when we move, we want full X and Y motion to represent all the different directions, up, down, left, right, obliquely left, obliquely right, if you remember correctly, obliquely down, those things. We need an actual vector in this case, so our code uses the full vector, unlike the BlendSpace1D that uses only one of the axes. So this is our input vector here, and this will do the job. Let's just run this and see what happens. We didn't pull down our virtual joystick. Let's do that. Let's go into the scene and let's bring it down to wherever we like. Let's save this and let's run. And there we go. If we move up, she faces up, but you'll notice some sticking and so on. And this is where the importance of the type of blend comes in. If you notice, we're not getting very smooth movement when we move our joystick from one direction to the other. So let's just close this and go into our animation tree. And right now we have continuous, but this is not a continuous movement because the sprites that we had before are only in one direction. It's either north, south, east, west, or one direction, 45-degree angle in between. So if we use continuous, it's not going to transition nicely. So we can use discrete or capture, and let's see if that makes a difference. So let's go, she's facing up, and this is much better. She's facing up, left, left. So as you can see, the diagonals work well. They are more responsive than if you use continuous. So this works really nicely. So if you're having problems like that and your movement looks off, try changing in the animation tree, try changing the type of blend, and you might get better results. This is what I wanted to show last week, but we were running out of time. The video was already so long, so I just want to add this quickly. Eventually we may want to build on this joystick. The plugin joysticks I've been talking about initially from the asset lib. A lot of them has different, not just the vector 2, but they also have directions as well, and different values that you can use. Obviously, if you're going to use it for 3D, this joystick that we have here is not your best option because we're only using the X and Y values for our 2D games. But we can also program this joystick to move for Z-axis as well, that we can use in 3D games. And in that case, you can just add another virtual joystick and rename it left joystick or something and put it on the left hand side at the bottom here. And later on we can probably reprogram this joystick to do other things. I already have it as a project, so it will be a long-term project. We could probably add a few more things to it. I hope this was useful, and hope to see you in the next one.